Welcome, everybody, to another exciting episode of This Week in Mormons with your hosts, Matt and Melissa.
I hope you're watching on YouTube because I'm doing awesome dancing right now.
You know, we are on YouTube. You can watch the video of what we do on YouTube live. Well, it's not live, but
Fascinating.
you can watch.
And aren't we gorgeous people?
I'm a very vain individual, but that's one of the seven deadly sins, so I try not to talk about it very often.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
I decided I don't like twin siblings as a name. I don't
Oh,
want
okay.
twim. We're just
Give me
Melissa
some
and
new.
Matt. Melissa, or wait, you go by Millie? Melissa.
Whatever. You can call me whatever you want to call me.
We'll just be the M's. Whatever.
Whatever. Listen,
Yeah.
I think we should talk about this off air because I hate the M's. So
Oh, okay. All right.
that's fine. I'm just
Hey,
kidding.
tell me about your fun Father's Day.
Oh yeah, we went to Lake Powell. Yeah, it was super fun.
So I've never been on a boat in Lake Powell. Wait, maybe when I was a kid, but
Okay.
is it worth the drive?
It is a far drive. I'm not gonna lie, that's the killer issue for me, is it's so far. But
Okay. Well,
um
wait. Now I have to ask you gas. So gas
yeah.
for the drive and then
Mhm.
gas for the fun on the lake. Are
Uh-huh.
we over $1,000 in gas?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, we're not over 1,000.
Are we in that neighborhood? Over 500?
I'd say it's around 500. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a pretty pricey vacation.
Yeah, but it is our summer vacation, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
that's what we do for our summer vacation. We look forward to it all year.
I guess
Um,
that's like taking a family to Lagoon prices, right?
I guess,
$500.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead. I didn't mean to
Um, no, that's
spoil it with
okay.
mine.
Lake Powell is beautiful. It's been rising because we got so much water in Utah this year. Now, I read an article that said that like something like 85% of the dams in Utah are at 99% full to over
Wow.
100% full.
Whoa, that's
Yeah.
fun.
Lake Powell is at 34% full, right?
Wow.
So it's not
Oh,
anywhere
okay.
near full, but it's such a big lake that it's impossible. But it has been rising about a foot a day. And when we went to bed one night, we kind of looked at where the water line was and woke up in the morning. And sure enough, 12 hours later, it had gone up at least 6 inches. So
Are you
it's
serious?
rising. Yeah, it's
Wait,
awesome.
how could you tell 6 inches? That's so
Because
little.
we took a mark in the wall. And then when we
Oh,
woke up in the morning, it had gone up 6 inches above that.
that's got to be kind of a fun sensation. Or do you not
Yeah.
sense it at all?
No, you don't sense it at all, but it is really beautiful because there was
Mm.
so little water last year that this year it's kind of a different new lake. I mean, there's still a lot of water needed. Obviously, we're at 34%. But anyways, it was a
Wait,
super fun
you've been
vacation.
going there a long time, right? So,
Since I met my husband. I mean, it's not
well,
something that
so
we did
you were
as
there.
kids.
You were there like 20 years ago, maybe.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so do you sense that it's lower than it was then?
Absolutely. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Even last year, even 2 years ago when we went, the water was higher than it is now. Last
Wow.
year, we lost so much water because we didn't get any and we still drained a whole bunch to send,
For
downriver to
Lake
all of the
Mead.
communities. Yeah. To all of the communities
Ah.
that need water. So it's lower, even with all of it that's come up than it was like 2 years ago.
And what does
But
one do at Lake Powell?
we do a lot of surfing behind the boat,
Mhm.
jet skiing. My husband got a wake skate, it's called. Um,
So wait,
and
is that like an ice skate?
it's like it's like a skateboard. It's in between a wakeboard and a
Oh,
surfboard. So we do a lot of playing on the water. We also do a lot of exploring. So Lake Powell's fun because there's a lot of little slot canyons you can drive the boat down and go explore. We had paddle boards that we could go exploring on too. I think we just really like spending time together. I like spending time in the sun. It's just a beautiful place to be and it's relaxing and there's so many of those moments where you're like there is no one else in the world here. Like you can be completely alone on the lake.
really?
You don't see another boat, you don't see another person, and you're just like, I'm alone in the world, and it is gorgeous. And it's just this really like, it's a kind of a cool feeling.
But
Yeah.
so many people go to Lake Powell. How is that
Yeah.
even
It
possible?
is a huge lake. It is just huge. It's
Wow.
huge. Yeah. I do have a story to tell though.
Okay.
So the last couple of days, it was just me and my husband. Everybody else had gone home, and we were getting a really big windstorm. So we decided to pull out a day early because we didn't want to stay on the water overnight in the wind and have to deal with anchors and all of that. So we went to the boat ramp, and there was a lot of people trying to pull out. It was super windy, and Jared's job is to back in the trailer, and my job is to put the boat on the trailer, right at the
That's
dock.
the harder job, right?
I don't know, but that's my
Oh, okay.
job. So
Yeah,
he's
I
good at
know
both
I
of
couldn't
them.
do
I'm
that.
only good at one of them. So, but it's super windy and it's stressful and it's difficult because everybody's blowing in the wind and everybody's trying to get their boats on. But I nailed it. Like I
Ooh,
put the boat right on. I looked at the wind where it was going. I like made
wow.
calculations of the speed. Like I was awesome. So I get it on. We're pulling the boat up about halfway up the ramp. My husband jumps out of the truck and he comes back and he says, "We have a flat tire on the trailer." And
Oh,
sure enough, I lean over and you can just hear air hissing out of the trailer tire.
oh.
So he's like, "Okay, I think it'd be easier to change the tire if we put the boat back in, obviously, like with the
Yeah,
boat
yeah,
not on
yeah.
it." So he puts me back in the water and he pulls just up onto the ramp to change the tire. Luckily, he had thought ahead and brought the right size lug nuts, the right tools to change the tire on the
No.
trailer. Yeah, like he just
He
thought of it at the
he
last
is
minute.
so prepared.
He's awesome. You know him.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I'm just floating out in the water for like an hour and it's 102 degrees on the
Oh,
ramp while he's trying to change the
oh.
tire. I'm just chilling, having a root beer, listening to Taylor Swift out in the water. Finally, he's like giving me the big wave from up on the ramp. He's ready. And I'm like, okay, got to do it again. It's even windier now, right? So I'm like, I got to do it again. So I start to pull towards the ramp in the wind and I'm crushing it. I'm doing so good. Well, there's this pontoon boat. It's got like, I'm not exaggerating, like 30 people on it. Like it's overflowing with people. And the lady's trying to get it in and she cannot do it right. And she starts twisting in the wind, blowing into other boats. And like, just like she backs up, she's twirling around. Like the wind is just taking control of her and she's losing it. Everybody on the boat is shouting at her. And meanwhile, I'm going towards her because she's in front of my trailer. Like, I'm like, so I got
Oh.
to back up. Anyways, so there's this big thing at the ramp. Everybody's just like trying to freak out, trying to help her. She keeps trying to get in, trying to get in. Wind blows her away. Anyways, it was a big mess. So so
Wait,
then
wait, wait, let me ask a question real fast.
yeah.
Why does she have 35 people on her boat while she's trying to pull it into the
Well, because they were just out on the boat together, and like you just wait on the boat and then you
Oh, I
put it on the
see.
trailer. Yeah.
That just feels distracting to me if you're trying to do
There were
something.
so many people on the boat. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm panicking because I'm like, if she can't do this and it's so windy and now I got to go next and there's all these nice boats out here and what if I blow into one of them and I'm kind of freaking out, you know? And then I get a text from my husband and he says, "Hey, just remember, if everybody on this ramp can be patient with her as a driver, they can be patient with you. So stop freaking out." Like he knew that I was freaking out from just watching what was happening. He's like, "Put on your favorite song, just get into Zen mode and get that boat on this trailer." So I was like, I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. So deep breath in and I just do. But I put it on again, just like perfect. Like I did so good. And I
Wow.
was so proud of myself. I was like, was anybody taking pictures? Like I need
No.
record, like that was amazing. So we pull out, we get the boat cleaned off, we head out of town, an hour out of town, we're in Kanab. Our axle on our trailer is busted. Yes.
Oh.
No, we pull into a gas station. We're getting gas. It's literally like we just barely left Lake Powell, but we've been driving like 70 miles an hour pulling our boat. And my husband looks at the trailer and he says, "Does that wheel look crooked to you?" And sure enough, one of our wheels is just crooked, like just crooked. So we kind of
Oh.
jack it up. As soon as we jack it off, the entire wheel falls off,
Oh.
like just falls off. Again, we could have been like totally going
Yeah.
70 miles an hour and had it bust off, but we were so lucky. It's 4 o'clock. We know everything closes at 5. We call a couple places, can't help, can't help. Finally, they're like, "You need to call a diesel repair shop." So we call a diesel repair shop. They send their truck out, some kid out, bless his heart. He's like, "What we're going to do, we're going to wrap a chain around the axle to just kind of hold it in place so that it won't keep falling off. Then you're going to drive with 3 wheels instead of 4 wheels through town. Follow me to my shop." And we're like, "Okay, like I guess we could lose the boat, but okay." Anyways, yeah, we got it there. They were super nice. They're like, "Yeah, we got to order a new axle." So our boat's still in Kanab, but it was a great
Oh.
vacation. But yeah, like everything kind of happened at the end, and I was just like, "Well, guess it's time to go home."
Melissa, I have 2 thoughts. First, from now on, I'm
Okay,
gonna call you the Admiral
thank
because
you.
you've
I
got some
love
boat
that.
skills.
I,
And then
I just
second,
am so proud of myself for doing the basics.
your husband's favorite YouTube channel is this
Oh
dude that
yeah,
goes around rescuing, like,
Matt's
stranded
Off-Road Recovery. Yes. He loves Matt's Off-Road Recovery. I guarantee he was hoping that we
I
would have
know.
to call in Matt's Off-Road Recovery. I guarantee he was like, "Well, maybe this won't work out. We got to call Matt. He's not that far away." Like,
As
I
you were telling this
guarantee.
as you were telling the story, I was hoping that it was going to involve
I
that
know.
guy, and
Yeah.
that Jed would get to be on his favorite YouTube
Oh
channel.
my gosh.
And
You're
he'd be
right.
like,
You're
"Why
right.
are you driving this boat in this place like this, where I have to come rescue you?"
So true.
Hey, well, let's get to the mailbag. So we've got some
Okay,
listener
yes.
comments. I mean, we only do this once a month, so listener, thanks for being patient. But we always promise we'll
Yeah.
get to the mailbag eventually.
And thanks so much for writing in. We really do wanna hear what you guys have to say.
So the first person says, "Hello, I really enjoy your podcast. As someone who has left the church but lives among neighbors and family members and colleagues who are LDS, I really enjoy hearing about current events from a believing and thoughtful perspective, not just going along with the church, but thinking and commenting for yourselves. So thank you. I did want to ask a clarifying question about the study you cited in your latest episode. You said the people in the US who had left their religion, 37%, I think I'm going from memory now, left the Catholic Church, 23% or thereabouts left a Protestant church, and then there was a 5% other. So I interpret this to mean of the people in the US who have left their religion, 5% or fewer of that group were formerly LDS. That is not the same as saying of people in the LDS religion, 5% have left. I hope I'm explaining
Right.
this well enough that it makes sense and that you're able to make a correction in a future podcast. My husband and I are very aware of statistics and data and how they can be manipulated, and I'm sure you did not intentionally manipulate the data, more that you misinterpreted the makeup of the population being studied. Maybe I'm wrong, but that was the impression I got from the discussion. Appreciate all you do. Thank you.
Yeah,
And I
listener, you are not wrong. Yeah.
That's right. I
We
know. As soon
we
as I,
we were
as,
wrong.
yeah, as I was listening to that podcast, I was like, oh my goodness, I said that totally the wrong way. So
And
yeah,
you were not the only listener who caught that and wrote in. So, yeah,
yeah.
we appreciate that. So, clarify, Matt.
So I have to think back to this podcast, but there was this. They were asking, like, have you left a church? Have you left a
Mhm.
church? And then of the people who said I've left a church, then there was like 37% Catholic, and then 23% Protestant, and then 5% of the people who had left a church were in this other category.
Mhm.
And what I had said was, so that means that at most 5% of the members of the church have left, right? But that's not what that was saying. That was saying of the people who have left a church, 5% of those came from other faiths. So it's just,
Yeah.
I was just saying it the wrong way.
Yeah,
Doesn't
yeah, yeah,
mean
yeah.
what I said it meant.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. I have another thing from the mailbag. So this listener writes, Matt and Melissa mentioned a transgender person, if worthy, could get a temple recommend. This isn't exactly true. According to the church handbook, if a person has not transitioned, then they may receive a recommend. If they have had any social or medical transition to present as someone of the opposite gender, they are restricted from many callings and from a temple recommend. Just wanted to clarify.
Yeah. Yeah. So just so people understand, restrictions, when we talk about restrictions, that would be like a church disciplinary hearing. Maybe they've changed the name of it now, but that's where you would impose restrictions on a person's membership.
Yeah. And I appreciate this listener writing in because when we were talking about this, we did just kind of quickly look up the handbook and I read it and I did miss this important part about social or medical transitions. That being said, we have had it's Pride Month, and we have had this listener write in and a couple of others write in about a couple of topics having to do either with transgender members of the church or with LGBTQ members of the church. And we did think that this is something we want to talk about more, but maybe we don't have time in this particular podcast.
Yeah, and not every listener is interested.
Right.
And
Yes.
so, yeah, so we recorded a special extra episode. So hopefully you'll be able to see that episode. It'll drop sometime soon. And we have a special guest on that we talk to just about these specific issues.
Yeah, specifically about LGBTQ issues, transgender issues with members of the church. And so for those of you who've written in, we are not ignoring you. We are going to just, talk about all those things a little bit more in depth in an episode a little bit later this week. So thank you.
Corey is another listener who's very good about writing in and letting us know when we've said things that are a little bit inaccurate. In this case, he's not telling us that we're inaccurate. We were talking about that story from President Oaks in the devotional, and we showed this graph that shows marriage age on the rise since 1970. And
Hmm.
he got some census data, and he said, hey, if you look at the median age at first marriage all the way back to 1890, what you see is 1890, the median age for marriage for men was 26. And then it
Hmm.
starts to decline. And in the 1960s, it goes down to 23 for men. And he says that the church was actually so concerned about that they created a little movie. Uh, let's see, it's called Worth Waiting For. And
I've seen that.
the film discussed the risk of getting married too young.
Huh.
And so in the 1960s, the church was worried that people were getting married too young before they were
Yeah.
actually ready to get married. And so he just thinks that it's interesting that President Oakes, as he's talking about marriage, chooses this time point where the median age for marriage in the church was the lowest that we've
Uh-huh.
recorded. And he's,
Interesting.
yeah. I mean, it's still higher today. So the median age for men in marriage is about 30 years old now. So it is still higher than it was in
Definitely.
1890. But
Yeah.
he said, that's an interesting thing that the church chose that point to start their graph and didn't go backwards to show this little dip that happened in that period of time.
Yeah. And we did have another listener comment on this same story. I think that you and I, Matt, had talked about that we thought some of the reasons for that declining age weren't necessarily the ones that President Oaks cited. President Oaks
Yeah.
cited that he thought it was primarily having to do with financial reasons. And
Yeah.
we were like, no, it's not that. But we did have another listener comment and say, I think he's exactly right. It is really difficult to marry right now if you're young. It's hard to get a job that pays well, can support you. Housing is super expensive. So I do think that there's definitely a lot of issues surrounding this.
I guess
Um,
when I got married, I doubled my income because I was working part
yeah,
time and now I
yeah,
had someone else working part time.
right. And you didn't have to pay two rents; you only had to pay one, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
And my wife's a saver, so I actually inherited some savings when I got married, and she
yeah.
inherited some debt, so I don't know.
I don't think there's any time where I think about your marriage that I'm not reminded that you married up. You married up.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely did.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into our quick clips. We're just going to go briefly through some articles of news that are, just real quick. So go ahead, Maddie.
Yeah, so the first question I have is, have you seen this photo going around about Joseph Smith? Have you
The one
seen this
that's in like a
locket?
locket. It's a daguerreotype.
Yeah,
It's like 6 or 7 months ago. It kind of came out, and people were
yeah.
like, "Oh, this is Joseph Smith." And then I think people were like, "No, it's not Joseph Smith."
So there's a scholar out there who does this sort of thing. He's not a member of the church, and he takes that painting that Emma Smith had that she said looks the most like Joseph Smith. He takes that painting and then he overlays it with the photograph, and he
Hmm.
says he's found 40 different spots where the photograph matches up perfectly with elements from the painting of Joseph Smith.
Huh.
And so his conclusion is that it is an actual a picture, a photograph of Joseph Smith,
So
which,
this would be the only known photograph of Joseph Smith we have, right?
yeah. Yeah, there's a couple of members of the Quorum of the 12 that we don't have photos of because they died before photos, right? So
Okay.
I think David W. Patton is one of them. But anyhow, but when I look at the photo of Joseph Smith, I say, that's not how I picture him in my head at all.
Yeah. Listeners, if you don't know what we're talking about, there's a link in the show notes and you can pull up this image. But yeah, to me it doesn't look like Joseph Smith at all either, but of course we just have these images
No, no,
from
just
movies
paintings,
and
right?
paintings. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
actually, so when I think, okay, if I had bumped into that guy on the street and he said, "I'm Joseph Smith," I'd be like, "No, you're not," because I know what Joseph Smith looks like. And then
Yeah, it is interesting.
it kind of made me think like Jesus, same thing, right? Like we have no idea what Jesus looks like,
Yeah.
and like even from the paintings, all the paintings are so different of Jesus, and I just think,
Yeah.
I wonder if I'm gonna have that same sensation when I see Jesus. I'll be like,
Is that you? Well,
and then
related to that, oh, sorry, did you
yeah,
have one more thing to add? Yeah,
no,
I
go
was just
ahead.
gonna say related, the final volume of the Joseph Smith papers is going to release, on an anniversary of the prophet's martyrdom, so on
June
June
27th.
27th. Yeah. What do
Yeah,
you
I
know about
think
the Joseph Smith papers?
so. I've been trying to purchase all of the books that I possibly can because I don't know, I'm weird that way.
'Cause you're you. Mhm. Yep.
But now I realize they're all online for free, and so I really shouldn't be collecting these huge papers. But
You
I'm
know
a
what? I'm
huge
in favor of having paper copies of things. I really am.
because sometimes things go away that are online.
Yeah, and it's just it's important to preserve important things. So,
I'm a huge fan of the Joseph Smith Papers project. I'm glad that they're finishing it up because, like, It is so I am not a historian, but on occasion I will do a research project that involves me finding stuff about church history. And because
Mhm.
I'm not a historian, I don't know all the books to go to cite things that happened in church history. The Joseph Smith Papers is a tremendous resource because it's a primary source that I can just go there, I can cite it easily, and I can actually look at the original thing that Joseph Smith wrote in some kind of a thing, and I can say, this is what Joseph Smith said. And then instead of citing a church manual, which I used to have to do in the past,
Uh-huh.
I can cite like the Joseph Smith Papers, the original source. So I
Yeah.
love them. I think they're great.
I really do appreciate that he kept such good records, right? That he wrote so much down. I really think that's really cool. I mean, I don't think that that was super common in his era, was it?
I don't think so. I don't think that a
Yeah.
lot of people wrote things. Well, and he
Yeah.
had scribes, right? That were.
Obviously. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
Yeah.
did you know you can go to the church history library in Salt Lake City? They have an original piece of paper of the Book of Mormon. I think it's First Nephi, something in First Nephi. But just for me, because I'm just weird this way, but like seeing the page where they wrote the translation of the Book of Mormon, like the original page, just seeing it there, I don't know. I just love that sort of thing. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
the Joseph Smith Papers is like that for me, only in a digital format.
Okay, cool.
So yesterday, the church dropped a new version of Preach My Gospel. It's updated, and
Preach My Gospel, the missionary manual,
yeah,
correct?
and my daughter, who just got home from her mission, couldn't have been more excited about it. I was like,
Do you know
"How
how
was
long
your
it's
day?"
Yeah, and she was like, "New preach my gospel, new preach my gospel."
Yeah, that's
That's
exactly
funny.
what it was.
Do you know how long it's been since we had an updated version? This is only the second version.
Well, so they published the original in 20 in
2004?
in 2000. Yeah, it's 20 years ago
Yeah, that's
ish.
a long time between
But
updates.
but they have been updating it digitally. So I think
Oh, okay.
2018 I think is the most recent update. But this is more of like an official thing because they've changed the sections. So there used to be a
Okay.
lesson called laws and ordinances or like ordinances and commandments or something. Like there was a section that was just commandments and now
Okay.
they've changed that section to tying all of the commandments into the baptismal covenant. So
Oh,
whereas it
interesting.
and they've got a new section called enduring to the end. So like they've updated like the way that the sections are and the lessons that you teach, and
Uh-huh.
then they've updated a lot of the content about finding people to
Okay.
reflect like social media or digital or phones, right? So in the
I think
past it would
that's
say,
necessary because
yeah.
that is the way a lot of missionaries are working these days.
Yeah, so like in the past, it would say, and give write down on the pamphlet a little message to remember to remind them to keep their commitments, and they say, or you could text message them, or you could send them a message on social media. So they like updated it in that way.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
we had the missionaries over last night, and so the first thing
elders are sisters.
elders have
Uh-huh.
two new elders in our stake. And the first thing we asked them is, "Aren't you so excited about the new Preach My Gospel?" And they lacked the enthusiasm that my return missionary daughter had. She was more excited than they were.
They'll get there.
The funny thing is, one of the missionaries that came, he went into the MTC the exact same day as my daughter did, right? But
Really? But he's still
sisters,
got 6 months.
yeah,
Yeah, that's fun.
yeah.
Okay, the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square, also known as what, Matthew?
Tab cats.
Tab Cats, I've got you on board now. They went on a wonderful tour in Mexico. They did a lot of good there in Mexico. They did obviously a lot of singing, and then also service in Mexico. This is their first big tour in a long time, and they were very successful and very excited about it. However, in sad news, the Tabernacle Choir, the Tab Cats, has had to cancel this week's live broadcast and perhaps potentially many more in the future because COVID. While they were in Mexico, several of them contracted COVID. Several more have tested positive since they returned home.
That's
And
really scary.
so there was a slight outbreak. Yeah,
You know, I was talking to mom about that this morning because she was supposed to work the Tabernacle broadcast this week. And
that's
she's
right.
like, this has never happened before. But
Right.
they
They never
call,
canceled music in the spoken word. They literally never cancel it.
and she didn't know why. She's like, what's
Okay.
happening in the church that they would cancel this? And I was like, I think they all got COVID. And she's like, no, no, no. And so then I Googled it. I'm like, you see, she's like, oh, okay. All right, I
Oh,
feel
yeah, yeah,
better.
yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, so hopefully it won't be, canceled for too very long, but obviously, if they're all meeting together, it's more likelihood of, spreading the disease, so they need to be careful.
They had recorded an episode while they were in Mexico, so they're
Mhm.
going to air that episode that they recorded in Mexico this Sunday, and
Okay.
then I think they'll be back to live. I don't know. I think they probably recorded that with the hope that they could have some other week off, but I guess
Probably, yeah.
COVID had other plans for them.
Okay.
So the podcast is called This Week in Mormons, and it never
Right.
specifies it as This Week in Mormon people because there really aren't
Oh.
Mormon people anymore. So I thought we should discuss Mormon crickets
Oh,
because
Matt, you are taking us brave new places. Mormon
because
crickets, go
you,
on.
you can say Mormon crickets with and still follow the prophet. So that's
That's
why.
right. Yeah.
So apparently they're actually not really crickets. They're, I think, katydids, and they have this like cycle in which they'll reproduce a whole lot, and then they'll have some seasons where there's a whole lot of them, and then there's some periods of time when there's not so many of them. And this year just happens to be one of those years where there's a whole lot of Mormon crickets. So
But this is the same animal that came when Utah was first established
mhm.
and came to I'm trying to remember, and I don't know if this
the
is like
seagulls, the
lore.
seagulls,
Yeah. So all the crickets came and started eating all the crops that the pioneers had planted, and they were in danger of not being able to have any food, their first harvest year here.
yeah.
And then a miracle happened and the seagulls came and ate all the crickets. Is
Yeah.
this
But
right? Yeah.
I don't think that that was their first year here. I think that's the part that's maybe a little more lore. But it was
Okay.
sometime when they were early on, like so yeah, it's like the cycle, right? They hadn't had them for a while and then suddenly they're inundated with these crickets and they don't know how to get
Mhm.
rid of them. And then the
Okay.
seagulls came and ate all of the crickets, and that's why they're
Okay.
called Mormon crickets. So
And so there's gonna be a ton of Mormon crickets in Utah this year?
well,
Or
so they've already
in the
got them in
West?
Nevada, and seriously, on roads they're using snowplows to get rid of them. There's so many of them on the roads.
I don't think
Ca-
that's very good for missionary work in Nevada. First of all, they don't get snow, so they probably don't have snow plows. And then second of all,
They're
how
called
we're
Mormon
just gonna
crickets.
send these Mormon crickets? I wouldn't wanna join that church. Sorry, go on, go on.
Imagine if there was a pest called the Muslim beetle or something like
Right,
that.
right.
We're such a special church that we're the only religion that gets negative things
Mormon
named after us.
beetles.
Anyhow, that's the story. You're going to see them if you live in the Mountain West, like Utah, Nevada, I think areas, parts of California and Idaho. You're going to see them, and you're going to think maybe it's something to do with the weather, and it's nothing to do with the weather. It's just part of
Okay.
the life cycle.
Okay, great, great. Okay, we had Juneteenth recently, the
Yeah.
holiday Juneteenth, and our church celebrated Juneteenth by giving a large gift to what they're calling the NAACP branch. But basically, Elder Matthew Holland, who is a member of the 70, he's Jeffrey R. Holland's son, but he's a member of the 70.
And a
He met
political
with
scientist.
Okay, great, great. So he's more important. Just kidding. Wasn't he the president of UVU for a
Yeah.
while too? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, anyways, he met in Salt Lake City with the executive director of the NAACP Memphis branch, and uh, so it's not a branch of our church. It's a
Yeah.
branch of the NAACP. Sorry, when I say the word branch, I think sometimes people are like ward branch, like that's
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
lingo.
Yeah.
But yeah. So anyways, the church donated $500,000 to the Memphis branch of the NAACP. And it's just to help them reorganize, and it's just a gift of what the church said is a commitment to create a more equitable society.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like the efforts that the church is making to try to overcome racism in society.
Yeah, I thought that was awesome.
Okay, so the next two stories are just a little bit quicker, not a lot to say about them.
Sure.
So, Miss Utah 2023 is a member of our church and a convert, and she's a
Okay.
return missionary, and her name is Sarah Soon, and she is the first Asian American to ever wear the Miss Utah crown.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
I see a picture of her. Look at her. Good for her. I think it's awesome that you return from a mission and you're able to represent yourself in the Miss America pageant. I think that's awesome. I think that's
yeah,
really cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think it'll be neat.
Great.
And
Good
then
for her.
there's news for three temples in the United States. First, they've announced the exact location of where the Wichita temple will be built in Kansas.
That's kind of your former neck of the woods, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I've been to Wichita once.
Okay, but you
But
lived in Kansas.
yeah, and my
Okay.
daughter served in Oklahoma, which is really close to Wichita.
Okay.
And they've announced the dedication date for the Orem Temple, so you can see the link in the show notes.
So that's is that a rededication?
No,
They
no,
like
so they built a new temple over by UVU
Oh, it's
on
a brand new temple. Okay.
on the west side of the freeway there. There's a
Okay.
and they had announced previously that when the Orem Temple is dedicated, then the Provo Temple will be closed for
For
remodeling.
remodeling. Okay.
And so they've announced that in February of next year, the Provo Temple will be no more. It's
Do
gonna
you
it's gonna look like the Ogden Temple. They're gonna totally
Okay, that's
change
what I
it.
was gonna ask. Do you think they'll change that funky design on the outside? It's kind of, iconic, really.
I know. I'm actually sad to see it go. So that was another thing when I was talking to the missionaries who went in the MTC the same day as my daughter. I was like, "Oh, so you were probably there at the Provo Temple taking pictures with your family at the same time that we were there taking pictures." And
Yeah.
he's like, "No, I'm from New York State, and so I didn't have
Oh, they said
family."
goodbye out there.
Yeah, and so there are like that's the new MTC drop off thing is everyone goes to the Provo Temple to take
Uh-huh.
pictures.
Yeah.
So it'll be no more like there won't be any of that where people have those photos anymore.
Huh.
It'll be a different temple, which I suppose is fine, but I kind of like the old look of the Provo Temple.
I mean, I think it's hideous. I do, but it is iconic. Like, you look at it and you know what it is. And the Ogden Temple used to have that same look, and frankly, it's so much more beautiful now. The Ogden Temple is breathtaking, but yeah, I mean, maybe architecturally someday that style will come back in. So,
I
yeah,
don't I
sad to
hope
see it
to
go.
I hope to not offend anybody because interior decorating is like a sensitive subject. People have like their opinions about it. But
So you think
so
me saying something's hideous might be offensive?
no, what I'm about to say I think could be offensive.
Okay, gotcha, gotcha.
Like the Provo Temple is dated in its interior, but I
Okay,
have so many memories from my time as a student at BYU and then as a missionary in the Provo Temple that I just sort of liked it. But
yeah.
the Idaho Falls Temple was equally
Mm.
dated in its interior, and they redid the Idaho Falls Temple, I don't know, maybe like 5 years ago. And so as they had the open house before the rededication of the Idaho Falls Temple, I just remember going through with my kids and they're like, I thought temples were supposed to be like beautiful inside. Well, people were like committed to this dated
Dated
style.
style?
So
Yeah,
I wonder, I just thought, well, maybe they'll redo the Provo Temple and they'll keep it just as it was, just the way they did with the Idaho Falls
maybe.
Temple. But no, I don't think they're going to.
Yeah, well, I do think there have been a lot of opportunities and will continue to be opportunities for members of the church and non-members to tour temple open houses. We definitely have a lot of that going on in the Utah corridor in the next coming months. So,
Yeah.
so that's a good.
Okay. My favorite one, famous Mormons. Yeah. 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 Mhm. Famous. That's right. So today it's famous people who did infomercial style commercials. So I think those people are more famous than anyone else. When I say the names, you're going to know who these people are. George Foreman. Okay, you know George Foreman. Wilford Brimley. So Wilford Brimley is the guy that he was in the firm, and if you ever hear somebody say diabetes instead of diabetes, he's the old man that would come on TV and be like, "Let's talk about diabetes." And so there's like a whole. You don't know this guy? He's like,
He he is so famous.
he is. He was on Seinfeld. One time, Kramer is doing some kind of like mail fraud, and he has to
Okay.
meet with the postmaster general, and he's the postmaster general, and he's
Oh
like,
my goodness.
well, you know
Okay.
why they call me a general? Because I get things done.
Okay.
He's
All right.
famous. You've
They
never.
got it?
You remember how our mom says diabetes instead of diabetes?
Yeah, I thought she was just,
It's Wilford
weird.
Brimley.
It's
Wilford Brimley
Wilford
did that
Brimley.
to her. Okay, fine.
Okay, okay, and then who's our third choice?
Ron Papay. I don't know how to say his last name.
Ron Papay. Oh,
Ronco. Ronco Foods. Oh,
Okay.
he did like the hair cutting machine that was like a vacuum and it would cut your hair, and the air. He was the first air fryer thing. He had all kinds of like infomercial things. Okay,
Matt,
anyhow.
I love this segment. I love this segment. I love that we talk about famous adjacent. And okay, so I get George Foreman, Wilford Brimley, or Ron Papay.
Yeah.
I Ron? Ron?
Wrong. It's Wilford Brimley. Diabetes.
Oh, it's
Wilford.
Wilford Brimley.
He's actually a very famous Mormon. I don't know how active he stayed in the church, but he lived in Utah for a long time. There's an article in the show notes that you can look at that
Okay.
talks all about him and I don't know his attitude and feelings about the church.
Okay, I'm Wikipediaing him right now. And yes, it does look like he was a member of the church or still is. Is he alive?
No, he probably died
He
of
died.
diabetes.
He died in 2020 in St. George, Utah at age 85. Okay.
Was it of
Um,
diabetes?
it was from a kidney condition, which may have been caused by diabetes. He definitely
Oh,
had diabetes. Diabetes.
diabetes.
He had type 2 since 1979.
Oh
Okay.
my, poor
Yeah.
guy.
Okay. Matt, I expect better next time. I want better choices.
Okay, I'll do better. I thought those would be a lot of fun, but that's fine. I'll try and do
Okay.
better.
Okay, it is time for big deal, little deal, no deal. And this is where we go into news stories a little bit more in depth if we think they're worth mentioning.
Yes,
Basically. Okay,
that's
you go
right.
first.
Okay, so the first story. There are going to be no more cornerstone ceremonies at temple dedications.
Okay.
Is that a big deal, a little deal, or no deal? 1, 2, 3.
Little
Little
deal.
deal. Yeah, I think it's a little deal.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, that's all. That's it. At every
Well, have we always had
this
cornerstone ceremonies at every temple?
we have. And there's a talk that Gordon B. Hinckley gave where he uses where he talks about how he says we've had this tradition of a cornerstone ceremony at the dedication of a temple, and then he talks about cornerstones and how they can be important in our lives. And so I thought, well, maybe cornerstones are some like doctrinal thing, but
Like a special ceremony.
yeah. But apparently no, it's just a tradition that we've done. And maybe it's like an unnecessary tradition because we're not doing them anymore.
Well, I wonder if we're not doing them anymore because, like the Helena, Montana temple that just got dedicated, it was a temple that it was built differently. It was
Yeah, it
kind of
was
like a
manufactured.
modular.
Yeah,
Yeah,
manufactured in
manufactured.
a yeah.
So
So
maybe
these
you're not able to do a cornerstone when you build a temple like that. Maybe I don't know.
I mean, well, and the cornerstone ceremony, it's not really a cornerstone, right? Because the foundation of the temple is far deeper. And so you've got, if you look at temples, you'll see this like metallic thing that says like erected in, and then it'll have the year. And the
Oh,
cornerstone ceremony is just them putting some mortar around that little piece. So it's
oh,
not really a
it's not the
cornerstone.
ceremony where they like dig the first dirt.
No, 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 no.
That's a different ceremony,
Yeah.
and we're still doing that.
Yeah, we still do that at the groundbreaking. That's the
Oh, the
groundbreaking.
groundbreaking. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
It's just when they're dedicating a temple, they're no longer going to do that little special thing where they put
Okay.
mortar around a little piece of, I don't know, metal or brick or something.
Okay. All right. Are you ready for my headline?
Yeah.
Okay. United States, US Mormons are becoming less Republican.
Hmm.
Big deal, little deal, or no deal? Three, two, one.
Big
Little
deal.
deal.
Big
Oh,
deal.
big deal. Big deal. Matthew, I knew you would have an opinion on whether US Mormons becoming less Republican is important. I do wonder slightly if this is related, like if this article just came out because the first presidency came out with that letter
Hmm.
talking about that members of the church shouldn't just vote straight party, right? Like that's not a thing that's good for democracy, that you should vote according to candidate, not according to party, right?
So there's a political scientist named Ryan Burge. He's a Baptist minister.
Mhm.
And he recently created a little blog or like a website where all he does is make graphics about religion in the United States. And there's these massive data sets where you can get data and you can download it and just make pictures. And so Jana Reese, in this case, got one of his little stories he wrote that shows that the United States, that Mormons are becoming less Republican. And so
Mm-hmm.
that might be why she decided to go to his website and look for the pictures and stuff that he makes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just a little bit. It's not very much at all. And the only reason I say it's a big deal is because any change like that at all is kind of a big deal. Like,
Okay.
people probably don't think about this, but leaving a political party is really similar to leaving a religion. People don't do
Huh,
it very often.
interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Think back to 2016 about all the people, if you know anybody, who said after Trump became the nominee in 2016, I knew a number of people that said, I'm done with the Republican Party. He doesn't stand for our values, and I'm not going to be a Republican anymore. And within a year, almost all of them were back in the Republican Party.
Okay.
And I don't know anybody who's like gone from being a Republican to being a Democrat or vice versa. It's a very
They
hard
go
thing to
more to
do.
being an independent or to being not affiliated?
Yeah, so typically partisan change happens like the parents would move from Republican to independent, and then the
Okay.
kids would move from independent to Democrat.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's like usually generational shifts is how partisan identification shifts over time. So
Mhm.
the fact that the church, members of the church, are becoming less Republican suggests that there could be generational shifts in party identification in the future.
Okay.
But right now, it's just a little bit.
Yeah, and it is, according to this article, younger members of the church who are shifting.
Yeah, except for that they can't really tell that from the data.
Okay.
You can't
Okay.
really tell that. All you know is that, like, yeah, you don't really know that. But yeah, that's the supposition because of like how that stuff works, right?
Gotcha.
Okay.
That was fascinating, riveting.
No, it's not. These are the things I talk about with my wife when she can't sleep at night. I'm like, let
Oh,
me tell you a fascinating story about party identification.
awesome.
Okay. Big deal, little deal, or no deal. Former FLDS members fear their children's disappearance is part of a Warren Jeffs prophecy.
Oh,
One, two, three. Big
big
deal.
deal. Oh, we
Yeah.
agree. I just think it's such a salacious headline. I haven't heard anything about this. And so yeah, tell me more. Big deal.
So we know that Warren Jeffs is in prison. And
Right.
and I
He's the
assumed
FLDS like
prophet.
prophet for the fundamental LDS church.
Yeah. And I assumed that what was going to happen is he goes to jail, then the church would move on without him,
Mhm.
and it would be the end of him as a leader of their church. But apparently, he's been receiving revelation while in prison. And so part of the revelations he's been receiving was about these children. And so then the children went missing. There's a link to the story. It's from ABC
Yeah.
News.
I'm
It
looking
has
at it
these
right
8
now.
kids.
A lot of these missing children are boys, not
Yeah,
girls. Huh.
right.
A lot of them have the same last name as each other too, which is not shocking in a polygamous community.
Right.
Huh. So they think that there was a prophecy by Warren Jeffs and
Yeah.
that's why the kids are disappearing?
I'll read this. Last year, experts say Jeffs began to release new revelations or prophecies, which ABC News has obtained, including one last June that calls for children of ex members to come back into the fold, and
Hmm.
another in August calling for members of the FLDS to die in the next 5.5 years in order to reach heaven.
Wow.
So they think that what's happening is these people who have left the FLDS church, their children are being kidnapped to be brought back into the FLDS church to
Huh.
fulfill this prophecy from Warren Jeffs.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a big deal because I think it's anytime you're talking about children's lives, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
But then it's like the FLDS church kind of isn't going away, and Warren Jeffs kind of isn't. He exercises tremendous power, even though
Hmm.
he's in prison.
Okay, yeah, that was an interesting story. Okay, here's mine. Can we use artificial intelligence to answer questions about faith? Big deal, little deal, or no deal? Three, two, one.
No
No
deal.
deal.
I can
We
ask
both
anything.
agree it's no deal. Darn it.
Oh man.
I am loving all of my playing around with artificial intelligence.
Really?
I'm finding it very interesting, fascinating. It might be helping me write a thesis for my master's program. It might be. No, just a little bit. But I have a lot of fun playing around with it and asking it questions, and it is changing constantly.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously, we've talked before about using AI to write your church talk, which I'm telling you
Not a
is
good
happening more
idea.
and more. It's happening more and more.
Do you think
um,
people are actually doing that?
I think people are using AI to ask questions about theology in our church, people who maybe don't belong to our church or who do, but who don't know the answers. And they're just asking questions and seeing what happens. Hey, you know what? I think we should try it.
No,
Give
no,
me
no,
a,
no. No,
yep,
no,
I
no,
think
no,
we
no,
should.
no,
Give me
no.
a question. Give
No,
me a
this is not
question.
good podcast content.
No, this is great podcast content. Let's see. Let's see. Give me a question. I'm going to ask AI about it.
Did Joseph Smith practice polygamy while in Nauvoo?
Ooh. Now, wait, do
AI
you
can't
know the
possibly.
answer to this?
Sure.
Okay, okay. Did Joseph Smith practice polygamy what?
While
While
in
in Nauvoo.
Nauvoo.
Okay.
How would AI
Oh
is
my
not gonna
goodness. Okay, this is like 6 paragraphs.
right.
Yes, he did. Polygamy was introduced in 1840s. It was initially practiced secretly.
Does it give you
The
any
practice of polygamy
citations?
was controversial, led to tensions. I will say, give me citations.
But they're gonna be fake citations.
Nope, not anymore. That was just in the first version. We're up to the fourth version now. I've
Mm.
got gospel topics essays, gospel topics essays. I've got
Oh.
Fair Mormon. I've got Joseph Smith papers documents. Yeah.
Wait, you just said this was a little deal or no deal, and now you're
Now
using it, making it feel like it's perhaps a big deal.
I just think it's fun, but I don't
Oh,
think it's a
okay.
big deal. Nah, I don't think it's a big deal. It's just fun.
Okay.
Listeners, try it on your own.
You're like a child who just discovered the internet.
I
Oh my
know.
goodness, I can go to websites.
Oh my goodness. No, it's fun. It's fun. Okay, you're up.
Okay, what 18 years of research tells us about the mental health of Latter-day Saints? Big
Okay.
deal, little deal, no deal. Three, two, one, no
Big
deal.
deal.
Big deal?
Yeah, I kind of think so. Well,
Okay.
it's 18 years of research. That's a
Yeah.
long time, right?
Yeah.
And I would like
Mm.
to know specifically about mental health, specifically with members of our church. Like, I think that's good information to have because we are a unique people, right? Like,
Yeah.
for example, we have a unique look on perfectionism, right? There's a lot of
Yeah.
anxiety among members of our church because we try so hard to do what's right all the time. For
Yeah.
example, that's a mental health perspective that's unique to our church. Or I think we also have things like uh, we have doctrines on suicide. Now, I don't know that those have been updated in the last 18 years, but those contribute to our thoughts about mental health, right? I bet we have because we have the most or one of the highest, I shouldn't just like quote statistics like I know them, but Utah is one of the states where we have the highest amounts of plastic surgery being done, right?
Yes. Yes.
So, is there probably some mental health issues with members of our church having to do with body dysmorphia? Maybe. Like, I'm interested in this. I don't know.
Well, so that one they don't address. The other ones they
Okay.
address them all, and you can follow the link in the show notes. And they say that Latter Day Saints are not as high in depression, social anxiety, almost all of the things you mentioned as people in other religions.
Okay, that's interesting.
But the only reason I say little deal or no deal is because it's very hard to study members of our church because we're so spread out. So you have to either just do a study of people in Utah and Idaho, maybe Arizona and Nevada to
Okay.
get a good enough sample size to really test this stuff,
Mhm.
or you have a really hard time like getting a really good sample. So we're a global church with
Right.
members all over the world, but we're really hard to study as
But we're
spread out as
studying
we are.
mainly members in the Rocky Mountain area.
Yeah, and so that's not really reflective of members of the church broadly.
Yeah, that's a good
So,
point.
so I applaud them for doing the work and like starting on some of these things. But even though it's been 18 years, you just can't get enough information about
Uh-huh.
members of our church in a global perspective.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, interesting. Okay, for your next headline, I actually have 3 that kind of go together, so I'm gonna just read one that kind of opens up the topic.
Okay.
So here it is. Davis School District pulls the Bible from elementaries and junior high schools due to vulgarity or violence. Okay, ready?
Okay, okay.
3, 2, 1.
Big
Big deal,
deal. Yeah, I think it's a
big
big
deal.
deal. Oh my
I'm glad you
goodness.
said big deal. This is obviously, something that's close to my heart just because I am a high school librarian. Um, there's a lot of issues dealing with book bans in Utah specifically. And basically what happened in Davis County, and I'm just bringing this up because eventually after reviewing the Bible, they had a request to look at the Book of Mormon and see if it should be banned.
Well, if you're
But
gonna
I'm
ban the Bible, don't you have to ban the Book of Mormon?
right, right. Well, I'm just going to give you kind of a big picture from my understanding. So, about 2 years ago, Utah, they tweaked the law having to do with what materials are allowed in schools, both in teacher classrooms and in school libraries. And their intent was to protect students from having access to content that was pornographic or severely violent, right?
Were there pornographic materials in school libraries?
Indeed, no.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay.
Um, to be clear, every librarian that I've talked to was completely in favor of this law, right? Like, good, let's protect our children. I don't know any librarians who are wanting to be the sneaky librarian that's giving pornography to children. That's not the plan,
In an
not
elementary
the idea,
school
right?
or a middle
Not the
school.
idea. Um,
Well, then
so,
so
so
why are they
no,
in favor of a law? If they're not doing it, why do you need a law to say not to do something that nobody's doing?
I think this is one of those things that comes in waves, right? Like, as parents, we want to have control over our children's education, and this is one of the ways that we do it, right? So, for example, when things came up, a few years ago about having to do with things like critical race theory, right?
Yeah.
Teachers would say, I don't want critical, or parents would say, I don't want critical race theory taught in my classroom, in my child's classroom.
Mhm.
And teachers would say, that's not in our curriculum. We're not going to teach it. But then parents would say, yeah, but there are books in your student's classroom or your teacher's classroom or in the library that could teach critical race.
But
And
they don't
so
if they don't know what they're talking about, why don't you just
but
say,
the point is this is a way for parents to be like, we want to have control of our children's education, which is a big deal in Utah, and
"Oh, yeah,
parents
yeah,
do want
yeah."
to have a lot of say in their child's education. So I think the legislature, in response, has tweaked its laws, and it's just kind of saying like, yes, we want to have things that support good education and that protect children. Again, which all librarians are for. So when this went into effect, what happened was there was a lot of parent groups, not a lot, but in Davis County, it is specifically known for having this parents group called, I think it's Utah Parents United, if I'm not wrong. Anyways, that are a group that kind of got together and we're like, we're going to look at every single book in every single library in every single school,
Are you
and
serious?
and if we don't think that it meets the standards, we're going to ask for it to be removed. And so they have been going through for, a a year and a half, and every time a book comes up that they don't think is appropriate, they'll ask for it to be reviewed. And not just in Davis district, in every school district, right? Like, I've had
Wow.
in my personal school, I've had two specific parents come in with concerns about a specific book, and every library has a process, every school district has a process of, it's called consideration or reconsideration, where if somebody feels that you can't just feel that like this book isn't appropriate for my child. You have to say this book does not meet the standards outlined by the Utah State Legislature. I'm talking on and on, but I'm just trying to get around to
Yeah,
the
yeah,
point of
yeah.
this.
So
So
the people know what it is.
so you can't just be like, I don't want my child to read that. You have to be like, I don't think any child in the whole entire world should have access to that material, basically, right? Because from a librarian's perspective, like, if it's not good for your kid should shut the book, or they should not check that book out, right? If it's not good for any kid, we shouldn't have that book in our library,
Like
right? So
pornography, right?
exactly.
Pornography or really violent books or something like that.
Right. But what's happening is a lot of the books that are being challenged, for example, might have like a transgender character in the book. And a
Sure.
parent says, that's not a value that I want to teach my child, that I want to model to my child. And so that book should not be in the library. And so then they'll submit that book and say that it needs to go into reconsideration. And then, there's a process.
Just
Every district has their own,
it's
and they.
because of the character, not because of the content?
So I can't, like, there's been a lot of books challenged, right? So
Oh.
if what the law is like if there's a character, we're not going to ban that book. I'm sorry,
Okay.
but there are transgender people in the world, and there are books that reflect that the world has those kinds of people in them, right? Same with
Hmm.
LGBTQ. If there is content that is graphic, right? Sexually graphic, we are not going to have that book in our libraries, right?
Yeah.
So, regardless of if it's a gay character or if it's a straight character, if there's graphic content, that doesn't belong in our libraries, right? But I'm just trying to illustrate the line between like not good for my kid versus not good for any kid.
Hmm.
Because there's other parents who say, my child is transgender and they deserve to have themselves represented in a book, right? They
Yeah.
deserve to be able to read a book and see, oh, this is a person who is like me, and there are other people like me in the world, right? So, anyways, a lot of districts have gone through a lot of books and looked at them. In fact, there was just a recent story by KSL that went through every single district in the entire state, what books they've had challenged, and whether or not they pulled the book or kept the book. And a lot of the most controversial titles, you can see like three of the districts decided to keep this book, three of the districts decided not to keep this book, right? So it does go district by district, and we're all trying to follow the law, but it's just an issue right now that has a lot of, I would say, emotion and tension surrounding it, because it does kind of feel like it's two-sided, like parents against school districts. I don't think it is two-sided. I am a school librarian. I'm also a parent. I also want what's good for our community. Everybody wants children to be safe, right?
But
Okay.
doesn't it feel like it's very, very subjective? If this one's going to ban the book and this one's not going to ban the book, that there's
Mhm.
not like some kind
Mhm.
of objective standard?
Yeah, and the objective standard is the law.
Yeah.
I do feel like some school districts are pandering more to parents, and I feel like some parents are saying, "Hey, who gets to make this decision?" Well, the person who gets to make the decision is the person who's in charge of collection development, which is your school librarian. Like
So
at the
how,
end of the day, I had to go to school for 8 years and get three different certifications and have all these trainings. Like your school librarian is typically the most educated person in your school. Typically, like they have to have so many certifications to learn how to do this. So,
so then how do you get rid of the Bible?
okay,
How's
so good question. So, what happened is all these parents are putting all of these books in for reconsideration, and other parents are being like, "Are you kidding me? Like, you want us to reconsider that book? Well, yes, it's so violent. Well, yes, it's so sexual." So, another parent was like, "Great." Like it's kind of like the pendulum swings, right? And you've got both sides of the pendulum. And there's this group of parents that are like, "Reconsider this, reconsider this, reconsider this." And some other parents are standing on the sidelines being like, okay, great. If we are going to reconsider all of those books, then we better reconsider your Bible. Because
Oh,
if you
so
look
somebody
at it,
submitted it. Somebody
if
said,
you look at it, your Bible has a lot of violence. It
yes,
has a lot of, it
sexual
has
content,
sexual content. We've
s-
got rape. We've got
profanity.
profanity. So yeah, like if you're gonna put in all these books to be reconsidered, we also better reconsider the Bible, which the school district, Davis School District, looked at. They looked at the policy. They looked at the state guidelines, and they said, "Huh, you're right. There's too much violence in here. There's too much sexual content, and it should not be in elementary or junior high schools. You can keep it on the shelf for high schools." So guess what? They followed the same rules they follow for any other book. Well, once that happened, the parents were like, "Awesome, now look at your Book of Mormon," because same thing. You've got Lamanite women being raped,
Oh, I
kidnapped.
know.
You've got cutting off
Cannibalism,
somebody's head with a knife.
arms,
You've got
Ammon.
God telling people to be violent. You better
Yeah.
reconsider that too. So, I mean, the school board was literally just like, "You're right. We need to apply the same standards to these books as we're applying to other books. And yeah, if we look at it, like, yeah, we should ban it." Well, then once they banned the Bible, the whole community got in uproar, and they were like, "You cannot ban the
It
Bible."
was all over national news, Melissa. Everybody is
Well,
talking about Utah banning the Bible in their schools,
yeah,
which is a
and then the
bad look.
community was like, "You can't," and the school district's like, "You have tied our hands. You've said we have to ban books based on content. We're looking strictly at content, and we've got to ban," right? Like, what do you want us to do? Like, we're trying to be equal, we're trying to be fair, right? Anyways, I think where we're at now is that there was,
They reversed their
riots on the
decision.
Capitol. They reversed their decision, and they said that the book can now be in schools. They have not made a ruling on the Book of Mormon yet. but
The
my
Bible, they
guess is
said,
that it
is
would be.
such an important piece of literature that we're going to ignore all of the bad stuff in it. And
Mhm.
so I think that they've only made this problem worse
I
because,
think they have too, and again, I'm not trying to push bad content, but, there are a lot of classic books, a lot of
yeah,
classic literature that have content in it that is, you know.
objectionable.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
then, if the
Yeah.
question is the literature important enough? Then that becomes a whole different debate.
Mhm.
And I think we're going to see more problems with this.
And frankly, just again, to explain, librarians have been trained in looking at all of these issues,
Yeah, why
right?
not just trust the librarians?
I
Yeah,
mean, I understand, like, if you wanna have a conversation with a librarian, if you have a specific issue and I get that, do that, please. They would be so happy to talk to you. But at the end of the day, like, yeah, we're looking at all of these issues in the context of a lot of education that we've had. We're reading a lot of books, and we want to protect children. The
yeah.
end. Yeah, yeah.
Well, let's move on to Mormons doing goodly.
You've had enough of my soapbox?
Not to
Alright.
imply that these parents aren't Mormons doing goodly, but I have a great story I
No,
want to
they
share.
have their children's best interest in heart. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So one of my students, his name's Raymond Stevens. He's a brilliant, wonderful guy. He comes
Okay.
from Sierra Leone, and he decided that he wanted to build a school in his hometown because they meet in this little mud hut. And
Wow.
yeah, and he doesn't really he's not he's not from the United States. He doesn't quite know how things work, but he was just like, I need to do this. I've been given so much. I want to give back to my community. So he had his
So how old is he? Like,
maybe in his early
early
20s.
20s?
Yeah,
Wow.
just barely finished at BYU Idaho.
And then went back to Sierra Leone and was like,
He was
"Yeah."
visiting there over
Oh,
Christmas
okay.
or sometime thereabouts, and he just remembered the school that he went to, and how it's like, so it's basically one room, and it's got cement walls and then dirt floors and then like a straw hut.
Huh.
And he talked to the local community, and he said, if I could raise money to get some building materials, would you guys build a new school? And they're like, absolutely, we would. So he figured out what it would cost to have the materials in order to build a new school, and it was $10,000. And he doesn't have $10,000, but he said
Right.
he had just gotten his tax refund, and he was going to buy himself a car. And he said, you know what? Instead, I'm going to put this towards building a school in Sierra Leone. And so he figured out how you do things in the United States, and he started a nonprofit and a GoFundMe page. And there's a link in the show notes. And he's raising money to build a school in his home community, and just because he wants to give back.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
That's a lot of initiative. Like, he's a really talented guy. Could do a lot of stuff with his time to make money, and that's what people are typically doing at that age. And
Right.
he's just like, I want to give back. I want to help the people where I come from.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad you shared that story. Mormon's doing goodly. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really cool. Cool. Now
Okay. Well.
it's time for This Week in Mormon History.
So Melissa, I like to try to be positive on these things, and
You're
I don't know.
always positive.
Yeah.
That's your
Okay.
number one characteristic.
So 90 years ago today,
Okay, so that'd
so
be what, in the 30s?
1933, if you can kind of try
Okay.
and remember the politics of that time. The
I
first
can. I can absolutely remember the politics of the 1930s. Go
30s.
on. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
interested.
The first presidency and apostles decided that the church as an organization could not take part in the campaign for the repeal of the 18th Amendment, since this is a partisan political question.
Is the
Now,
18th Amendment the alcohol one?
it repeals prohibition.
Okay.
Uh-huh. It is hoped, however, that all LDS would vote against repeal of national prohibition.
Hmm.
So 35 years later, though, when it comes up, and it's like voting, then the church does get involved, right? 35 years later, they reverse this decision and participate in a campaign against liquor by the drink in Utah as a moral issue. So yeah, it's just the church often gets involved in moral issues,
Yeah.
but it's interesting that on the repeal of alcohol, right? Then they said this is not something we could get involved should get involved in. This is partisan politics.
Was the again, I'm so bad at history, but
Yeah.
there was a period of time where LDS people still drank a lot of liquor.
Yeah.
Even though the word of wisdom had come out, it wasn't like, "And we all live by this." Is that
Yeah.
still this period of time or not really?
So Heber J. Grant was the president of the church, and by
Okay.
this time you could not get a temple recommend if you were drinking alcohol.
Okay,
And
okay.
he did as prophet, he pled with the members of the church to vote against repealing the 18th Amendment, repealing prohibition, because he did think that prohibition was a good thing, but the church officially said we're not going to take a stand on this.
Okay. Alright. That was very interesting, Maddie.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
40 years ago today, so 1983. This
Okay,
one
I
I
was
think is,
alive.
yeah, it's a little. So Forbes magazine notes that in recent years, at least 10 separate swindles have been uncovered in Utah involving more than 9,000 people, which was 1% of Utah's population at the time.
Oh, wow.
And losses are estimated at more than $200 million. And asking itself why, the magazine described Utah as fertile soil for swindles because of
Oh,
excessive trust among LDS members. So most of the
okay.
people who get cheated are members of the church getting cheated by other members of the church.
And this came out in Forbes magazine, which is a big magazine.
Yeah, and this was 40 years ago. And Melissa, it's still happening today.
Oh, yeah,
You
absolutely.
can pick up the newspaper any day and you're going to read about some member of the church that's been swindled by some other member of the church.
And a lot of times, it's somebody you trust because they have a position or a calling of authority, and you're like, "Yeah, they're a good person. I trust them. Yeah, I agree with this. Yeah."
Isn't it fascinating how we have to learn the same lessons over and over and over again?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That is true. That is one of the reasons I like this segment, even though I make fun of it and say that I don't, because I do think it is interesting to look at history and be like, "Huh, we're in the beginning of that cycle again, or we're right in the middle of that cycle again." Yeah.
Yeah. I do like when people have the default position of trusting people. But
Sure.
I've just known so many people who lost money because somebody was in a position of trust in the church and told them to invest in something or other, and
Mhm.
then they lost money.
Yeah.
And I don't want to suggest that Joseph Smith was a swindler, but this
I
whole,
know.
there was the Kirtland Safety Society where early members of the church lost money investing it in the Kirtland Safety Society. But again, the prophet had told them to do it. But like this idea of members of the church losing money because they're trusting other members of the church, it's almost as old as the church itself. Well, listener, thanks for another exciting episode of joining us for another exciting episode of This Week in Mormons. Just a couple of reminders. Remember, you can subscribe to Patreon and get bonus content for just a few dollars a month. We encourage you to subscribe to This Week in Mormons on social media, facebook.com at This Week in Mormons or Twitter at The Real Twim. And I also have another podcast, The Latter Day Lens, that it'd be great to have you join as a listener of The Latter Day Lens. And as you know, we like to hear feedback in the email. So you can email us at contact at This Week in Mormons, or if you want to leave a voice comment, you can go to our website, thisweekinmormons.com. Thanks for listening to the original Mormon / Latter day Saint News podcast. Have a great week.